Hello my friend, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Alexandra. I'm a professional fashion designer, pattern cutter and creative consultant who helps you build your dream wardrobe through my Create, Cut, Construct framework, which basically is the entire fashion process from design to drafting patterns to your measurements to construction. And if you really want a deep dive, then head on over to my high value, low cost fashion membership, the DPL Atelier, where you literally have direct access to me and all the good stuff. But here on YouTube, we just like to dip our toe, okay? I still like to deliver the high value, but it's a case of just wetting your whistle. That really freaks me out as a saying. And just scratching the surface, seeing what is there to be uncovered and helping you unleash your inner fashion designer. And one of the biggest things that is searched, or one of the pieces of content I've already done that you are really engaged with, is luxury sewing, professional standards, and dare I say, couture technique. So obviously all of this gets shared with my members as well, but I thought I would do fabric manipulation techniques. Now this ranges from gathers to pleats to smocking to tucks to all sorts. It's literally manipulating fabric either to constrain volume into a narrower element of a garment, or for and giggles, to be honest, for design details, to have fun with it, to experiment and to have a really nice aesthetic. So I'm sure you are familiar with knife pleats and box pleats and inverted pleats and pin tucks and all of this. Not only am I going to be covering the basics if you're not familiar, but I'm going to be teaching you how to up level them and do some really cool techniques that just take them that one step further. Because knife pleats, really lovely, beautiful, but let's start elevating it into more designer-led details so that you can start creating a luxury wardrobe. Let's jump into it. I'm going to be using a variety of tools today, which is my Pattern Master. I have fabric pens just to highlight the spacing and anatomy of a pleat, which we'll be going into shortly. I'm using calico, a medium weight calico. I have an iron over there. I have steel-headed pins, or glass-headed pins would work as well, because when you put an iron over it, that's not going to cause any damage. Pair of scissors, and I think that's everything. Obviously I'm going to be using a sewing machine too. I hope I've rounded up the tools. If I haven't, I will list them on the screen now. So there are three main types of flat pleats, and you may be familiar with these, you may not. So that is a knife pleat, a box pleat and an inverted pleat. Let's not panic, they are really easy and simple to do, but there is an anatomy of a pleat as well. So if I start folding, and I start folding all in the same direction and pinning like so, what I'm creating here is a knife pleat. Now I'm not pressing it, so there's multiple ways in which you can fix your folds of fabric. So I'm just going to fold this. I'm literally doing it by eye, so this is probably going to be very inaccurate in terms of measurements. But I'm just folding all my pleats with adjacent underfolds turned in the same direction. So, and to pin them, to secure them, these here are knife pleats. Now they could absolutely be pointing that way if you so chose. This is the length of the pleat. This here is the pleat depth, okay? So if I start marking on it, I'll mark the pleat depth in blue, which runs down this line here to the width, which is here, where this folds, where this folded fabric comes back on itself. That is the pleat depth. So this is the pleat depth. I'll do that in a blue pen. If I unfold this, and I'm just going to mark by there where this pleat meets the fabric. If I take this pin out and I unfold it, this distance here is my underfold. So this is my pleat depth. Twice this distance is my underfold. And if this has been notched and we end up folding it, that creates the pleat itself. That creates the fold in the fabric. You can then determine your pleat spacing. And so if I didn't want them to be all the same size, if I wanted a gap in the middle, what I could then do, if I unfold this, is determine a pleat spacing. So say I wanted this much in between them, this would be my pleat spacing. And then I would repeat again. So if I took my pattern master and measured that, that is 4 centimeters on the nose. Look at me. Look at me with these years experience just doing things by eye. So this could be my pleat depth. 4 centimeters is my pleat depth. 8 centimeters would then be my underfold because we're doubling the pleat depth. So 8 centimeters. And then what's this? A 1.5 centimeter pleat spacing. And so this is how you'd want to be marking your fabric or creating your pattern. So if I then come to refold this, which is 4 centimeters, I can pin that in place, leave a centimeter as my pleat spacing, fold this again 4 centimeters, and I can pin that in place. Now again, as the designer, you do not need to have spacing between your pleats. As I originally folded this, I had 0 pleat spacing, and that's also fine as well. This is completely your prerogative to decide what design you like. But here we have a 1.5 centimeter pleat spacing with a 4 centimeter pleat, meaning we have an 8 centimeter, which is this combined distance here, underfold. And this is your basic knife pleat. Now box pleats, if we slide on over, have adjacent underfolds of equal depth turned in opposite directions. So whilst we are folding our knife pleats all in the same direction, whether that is this way or that way, box pleats go opposite to each other. So what that looks like without marking the pattern is folding under here, and I'm just going to pin that in place at the top. And notice that I folded this one this direction. So I folded under here, going that way, and I'm just going to do the same and fold in the other direction. And this here is a box pleat. So these are my knife pleats, both going in the same direction this way. My box pleat is mirrored. So one fold points to the right, the other fold points to the left. And you still have the same anatomy. This is the pleat depth, this is the underfold. And you can determine your spacing either side of this as well, and then repeat the process. An inverted pleat is literally the reverse of a box pleat. So an inverted pleat is where the adjacent underfolds are equal in depth, but they turn in to meet the center. So you literally can determine which side you prefer. This is a box pleat, and if I flip that over, this is an inverted pleat. And these are the main flat pleats that you may or may not be familiar with. So the first thing I would advise you do is play around with this. Play around with the depth of your pleat as well. They don't need to be 4 centimeters wide. You can play around with the scale and proportion of those too. So another thing to notice, as I've cut pieces of calico, 3 strips of calico that the exact same length, is how much pleating your fabric reduces the width. So if you are working on a pattern and you're doing the slash and spread technique, again, this is something I teach inside the DPL Atelier. Alternatively, you can get a fashion file pack for a fraction of the cost and learn how to do the slash and spread technique, available on my website. But have a little look. If you are pleating, how much fabric this takes up. And so if you were to apply this to an existing garment that you wanted to introduce pleating to, you would absolutely dissect it using the slash and spread technique, spread that out to incorporate all of this volume, and then add your pleats in. Now, there are multiple ways in order to fix these pleats. So you could absolutely just do a line of stitching along the top. You could press these. At the moment, I know I pressed it with my thumb, but these are unpressed pleats. And if I don't press it with my thumb, let's have a little look at how different the knife pleats look when I try not to interfere with them as much as possible. Same would obviously apply to the box pleats and inverted pleats as well. So you can see even by pressing it with my thumb and finger has an effect with calico. Calico is a very easy textile to work with. Cotton is a very easy textile to work with. So if this is your first rodeo, I should say, if this is your first rodeo, then by all means pick a textile that you find comfortable and then start to experiment with other textiles as well, like chiffons and silks, and see the difference. So this here, I've obviously not pressed down. And then this one here, even simply pressing with my fingers has given it a much sharper edge. The light in my studio is really helping with that demonstration. And so if I went over to my iron and pressed these down, this would be a much crisper finish. And again, if I reflect that on the back, with the inverted pleat there, this is a much crisper finish. These are really soft folded pleats. Both are really beautiful. It completely depends on your preferred design outcome. And so once you kind of get to grips with this, which really is the basics of pleating, I want to start combining all of these techniques and creating a more couture result. So the first thing I'm going to do is figure out a design. I'm just going to fold this in half and establish where my center point is. And I will just mark that with my fabric pen. You could notch it, you could tailor's tack it, you could chalk it, you could do whatever you do, whatever you want to do to just mark the center there. I'm then going to determine my first pleat. And I'm going to start to create a design. Now my design is going to combine all three pleat types. I don't have to just stick to a knife pleat. I don't have to just stick to box pleats, yada, yada, yada. So what I start by doing is measuring out evenly whatever I'm applying to the left side, I try to mirror on the right, just to make sure that the work I'm producing here does look a little bit balanced and professional. Another thing it is worth noting is I end up doing this on calico. I'm going to sample this, I'm going to put it in my fashion file. I always encourage my members to take the pressure off their shoulders of feeling like you need to create a whole garment every time. Sometimes it's just about being playful and experimenting with the technique itself. So I'm using calico, I'm going to be using a contrasting thread as well so that you can see my stitches. But as I'm pleating it, I'm pressing it with an iron, I'm pinning it in place, and I'm taking my time to secure it. Once I'm happy with the layout, you're going to see me start marking on with my Pattern Master different measurements coming down the length of the pleats. And these are going to be markings for where I stitch up to secure the pleat. So you're going to see that it comes down into quite a soft V shape. And it's a case of playing around with this. This can be any shape you like. It could be a curve, it could be a wiggly line, but I'm just, again, trying to balance it left to right before edge stitching on my machine. Forgive the quality of the video here. I believe the battery on my camera ran out. And then I'm just edge stitching it down, going a little shorter as it goes out to the edges, and it gives a really nice finish. And so once you're familiar with the basic premise of pleating, you can start experimenting on different textiles, on different weights of fabric, and different methods on how to secure the pleats themselves. So here I'm working on a lightweight linen, and I'm just kind of doing it by eye, unless you obviously want them to be methodically spaced, then we've just gone through how to do that, but depending on the design you might want it a bit more irregular and organic. So I'm just going to do it by eye just to show process. I'm doing an inverted pleat in the middle, and then I'm doing knife pleats facing inwards either side. And to secure this you could do invisible slip stitching by hand. This is a really high-end way of having that couture finish to your sewing projects. I always try and encourage any of my members to hand sew at least one element of their me-made garments, because it really does give that high-end quality finish. But alternatively, you can have fun with it and start doing some decorative stitching on top, maybe in a contrast colour, and just really try to elevate your pleat work. It doesn't have to stop at simply folding the fabric, pressing and stitching it down. You can start to have a lot of fun with how you do that. So let's take this over to the machine and have a play around. So to get started, I'm just going to baste it with the longest line of stitches on my machine, and I'm just going to initially secure these pleats in place. And this is within my seam allowance as well. And then once I'm happy with that, can snip all away, and then I can start sewing and securing it with a decorative design. Now you can plot this out before, mark it on with a bit of tailor's chalk or fabric pen or anything like that, or you can just absolutely free wing it and go freestyle and see what you like. I'm just going over it twice to double up on the thread. If you don't have top stitching thread, this is a great tip just to make it stand out that little bit more. Top stitching thread, after all, is just a thicker thread for decorative purposes. And so I can go over those lines twice and it'll just give a really high contrast detail. And now if I just press the bottom of my pleated panel, just to ensure the pleats don't run down the entire length of the fabric, this is going to allow them to radiate out. There we are. I hope that you found that useful. I cannot wait to see how you apply it to your own wardrobe and sewing projects. I always advise sampling. I literally sound like a broken record inside the atelier because anytime my members are like, do you think this would work? I'm like, sample it, trial it, playtime. This is literally what fashion is. It's experimentative. We're experimenting. And so I really encourage you to not only try the techniques I've just taught in this video, sure, on cotton, on calico, as you'll have seen it is easier to work with, but sample it on a variety of textiles because you're going to come up with a variety of results, and then you, as the designer, can cherry pick which you prefer, which you find easy, which fills you with confidence. Try and push your technical skill because it will expand you as a designer, and of course, tag me in whatever you do at Digital Pattern Library over on Instagram, at digital.pattern.library over on TikTok, at Digital Pattern Library here, wherever. Just come and find me, tag me in your makes, and I cannot wait to see them. And then of course, if you'd like to take it one step further, come and join us inside the DPL Atelier, because if you thought this video was good, whew, we have got hundreds of exclusive masterclasses where I really do deep dive and teach all the juicy stuff to my members. So peace and love. Thank you so much for joining me on YouTube. If you have 2 seconds to spare, like and subscribe. Always cringe myself out saying that. And I will catch you on the flip side.